Hi, I'm Michael Carlton, and in this video, I'm going to be introducing and explaining some of the basics of Microsoft Excel with the hope that I can give you a foundation that will allow you to leverage Microsoft Excel as a tool rather than see it as something that's holding you back from excelling as a student in your personal life or in your professional life. In college, I was a business major specifically focused on studying accounting and finance, and Microsoft Excel was a program that I used every day, if not several times a day. One thing that I was actually surprised to learn in college was that a lot of the other majors don't get the same exposure to Microsoft Excel. Specifically, people in the STEM majors who I'm surprised don't know Excel, and it actually turns out to be a major detriment because they don't know how to use Excel for things like graphs, organizing their data and research and all that, and that's something that I'm really hoping to remedy today. So here we are. The goal of this video is to give you a baseline understanding of the functions of Excel, how it's laid out, cells, formulas, and basically everything else you need to know to start leveraging Excel as a tool and push past the hives that you get every time Excel is brought up because you don't know where to start. So let's jump right into it. The very first thing that we're going to do is select the Excel icon down here or wherever you have it and open up a blank Excel workbook. So to do so, we're going to go to New, Blank Workbook. I'm going to drag that over. And then we're going to go ahead and hit this save. And that's going to pull up this prompt, which is asking us what folder we want to save it in and what do we want to name it. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Demo 2. Right off the bat, I can see why someone who's new to Excel might be intimidated. You have to decide which cell to start in, what should go where, should it go horizontally, should it go vertically, and so on and so forth. And it can definitely be overwhelming. So we're going to cover some basic definitions and terminology that will come up throughout the video. And the very first thing to notice is that the spreadsheet is laid out in a grid format with columns labeled alphabetically from A to Z and then into AA, double B, and these will continue to generate as you scroll across, and rows labeled numerically, and as with the columns, these are going to continue to generate as you scroll down. So you don't really need to worry about running out of room. So when you start, you're probably not going to have that much information. It would be more likely if you had a massive spreadsheet full of data that you needed to analyze. Each one of these boxes is a cell and serves as a place to put information like numbers, text, and dates. Each cell has a location name or coordinate which consists of its column letter and row number. If you've ever played Battleship, it's a similar idea. You can pinpoint a cell with these two coordinates. So right now we're in cell A1, and you can also see that by looking up here in the name box. So you can click around, see that this will update every time you're in a new cell. To move around the cells, you can either click on a cell by moving your mouse like I was doing earlier, or you can use the arrow keys down, right, up, and left to highlight a bunch of cells. Either left click on the mouse and drag, or click in the cell you want to start, press and hold Shift, and use the arrow keys to highlight whatever information that you want to highlight. So now that we have the basic terminology out of the way, let's talk about inputting data. To input data into a cell, you either select the cell with your mouse or navigate to the cell with your arrow keys, and then you just start typing. So for example, if I want to type my name. Once you have your data in the cell, just hit Enter or Return, and the cursor will move down a cell, just as mine did. You can also enter the data and use the left or right arrow keys to move in either direction. So for example, if we wanted to put a bunch of numbers at the top of a column. Whether you're inputting dates, text, a long note, or anything else, you're going to do it the same way. So now let's go ahead and talk about formulas. And formulas are part of what make Microsoft Excel so powerful. Not only can they help you to do mathematical functions, they can help you to search for and find information in a big file, count certain data points based on criteria, and many, many other things. For the sake of keeping this fairly simple, today we're going to cover 5 functions that you can start using right now. So the very first one is going to be basic math. This is going to be addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And this actually brings up a good point. If you see here, when I typed multiplication, the cell is actually not wide enough to show the whole word. So if you go up onto this little line right here, you can see that my cursor becomes a bar with 2 arrows to the left or right. To make the cell wider, you either click and drag, or you can just double click and the cell will automatically adjust to be the right size. So now let's go ahead and input some numbers. So let's start off with addition. When writing a formula, we're always going to start off with the equals key. And this is going to tell the computer that we're ready to start using a formula. From there, we're going to click on the cell we want to reference. Let's go ahead and type the plus sign after each cell that we reference, since we're adding. And once we have referenced all of our cells, we're just going to go ahead and click enter or return. Now, another way that you could have done this, and one that I tend to prefer, is using the equal sign and then just using the arrow keys to highlight. And it's always going to start you in the cell that you're typing the formula. So you know from here to reference the 3, you have to go left and down 2, and finally left and down 3. And again, we've referenced all the cells, so let's go ahead and hit return. Now, just as with addition, we're going to go ahead and do equals. We're going to go over, and instead of putting the plus, we're going to put the minus sign. So let's go ahead and get all those referenced and hit return. Multiplication is going to be the same as addition and subtraction, except for instead of doing the equal or minus, you're going to do Shift 8 to get the star, which is the multiplication symbol in Excel. So let's go ahead and reference that first cell, Shift 8. And let's repeat that for all of those numbers. Okay. And finally for division, this one is just going to be the slash on the same key as the question mark. So equals, and let's go ahead and divide these two numbers. So as you can see, basic math is fairly simple to do in Excel and is actually something that can be pretty useful for a lot of stuff. So let's go ahead and move on to the next function, which is the sum function. And the thing that I really like about the sum function is it's just adding, but I find that it's a lot faster to use. To do the sum function, we're going to type equals the word sum, and you're going to see that a list of suggested formulas are going to pop up. Don't worry about those for now. It's something that we'll get into a bit later. But to continue with this formula, we're going to do the open parentheses, and you're going to see this little menu that's going to pop up. And this is basically a cheat sheet to what's included in the formula. You can see number 1, a comma, number 2, comma, and then it goes on. Since this is highlighted, we know that we're referencing the first number that we want to add. So let's go ahead and click on these numbers from above. We're just going to put a comma after everyone, and you're going to see that it shifts over to the next number in the sequence. Go ahead and close the parentheses and hit enter, and you're going to get the sum. A faster way to do this is by doing equals sum, and rather than clicking all of them and putting the commas, select the first number, drag down, and this is going to highlight the numbers and create a range. And as with manually putting the commas, it's just going to add those numbers. And one thing that I want to touch on is if you were to hit enter right now without putting the final parenthesis, it's not really going to matter. Sometimes you'll get a little message that pops up that says, we've noticed something wrong with your formula. What you should do then is usually go ahead and hit OK. Look and see if you've got closing parentheses, you're missing commas, and if you can't figure it out, sometimes I find it easiest just to start fresh. The next formula that we're going to talk about is actually 2 formulas, and it's the minimum and maximum. So for the minimum, we're going to go ahead and type equals min, and we're going to use that open parenthesis, and as with sum, you're going to see it wants to have a range of numbers. So let's go up to these numbers that we used earlier, click and highlight, close the parenthesis and hit enter. And as we can see, the minimum number is 1, and that's what our formula returned. For the max, we're going to type equals max, open the parenthesis and do the same. And obviously the maximum is 5. And this can be really useful when you're trying to figure out what the upper and lower bounds are, or what the range of your data is. The final formula that I want to talk about are if statements. And if statements are really nice because they allow you to get a little bit more complicated with Excel without getting too complex. Basically what an if statement does is we tell the computer a certain criteria that we want it to look for in our numbers, in a column of categories, or whatever it is, and it's going to return either a value if it's true or a value if it's false. For example, let's go ahead and pull those numbers that we used in the earlier example. To do so, I'm gonna highlight, do Command C or Control C if you're on a Windows. I'm gonna click right here and I'm gonna do Command or Control V. And that's just going to copy and paste those numbers. Now, let's say that we want to sort through and see which of these numbers are greater than 3. Obviously, we can look at this right now and see 4 and 5 are greater than 3. But if we wanted a formula to tell us whether they were greater than 3, we would do equals, write the word if, and then open parenthesis. So you'll see here that it has logical test, value of true, value of false. Our logical test is going to be where we tell the computer we want the number to be greater than 3. We want it to test and see, of these numbers, which of them are greater than 3. So to write that, we're going to click this first cell. We're going to insert the greater than sign. We're going to type 3. And then our value of true, let's go ahead and have it type true. And you'll notice here that I used quotation marks. And that's when you want the computer to output a word, you need to use quotation marks. And then finally, we're going to select value of false. Let's just put 0. Let's close the parenthesis and hit enter. Obviously, 1 is not greater than 3, so we're going to get 0. One thing that you can do here, which is rather than typing the formula into all of these cells and referencing these one by one, if you highlight over to this little box, you'll see that my cursor turns into a solid black plus. If you just click the box and drag down, it will apply the formula to all of these cells, and you can see here that A22 was the cell we originally referenced. If we go down, it changed to A23, A24, 25, and 26. Another way that you could do this rather than click and drag is to hit Command C to copy, go down one cell and click and drag, and then do Command or Control V to paste, and it works the same way. The final thing that I want to talk about is one of my favorite features in Excel, and it's actually the quick formatting options that you can apply to a cell. For example, if you want to make a budget and you want to have your number in the form of dollars, then you can click on that cell, navigate up to this box right here, and click on the dollar, and you can see that that'll format it as dollars and cents. Another useful feature, especially for science majors out there who need to go to a specific number of significant figures, is the decimal place increase or decrease button. So if you click on the cell, navigate up here, this will increase the number of decimal points. This will decrease the number of decimal points. And I find this to be really useful because you can quickly highlight a bunch of numbers and you can format them uniformly. For example, if you needed to apply 4 decimal places to every number, all you would have to do is highlight them and make it so there were 4 decimal points. Another thing that you can do is percents. And finally, if you navigate up here, you can see that there are a lot of options, including long date and short date, time, fractions, and even the scientific notation. So this one, which I originally had as time, I can go ahead and format that way, or because the numbers all correlate to dates and other bits of information when formatted differently, if we click on this, it'll format it as Saturday, January 0, which doesn't exist, but it works. And the very final thing that I want to talk about is saving. And obviously we saved at the beginning of the video, but to just reiterate it, we're going to go up before we close our spreadsheet and we're going to navigate to the floppy disk, hit save. And because we already saved, we're not going to have that window pop back up, but this just gives you some peace of mind when you're closing out. Do it again for good measure and you're good to go.
My hope is that you now have a basic understanding of the terminology and the actions that we covered in Microsoft Excel. I highly recommend that you go in and you play around with what we learned today. Take a bunch of numbers, put them in a spreadsheet, try to format them, try to count them, and see if you can apply the formulas that we learned today in a way that starts to make sense to you. In future videos, I'm going to cover topics like how to lay out the data for a budget, how to make graphs in Excel, and even just how to make the data look cleaner, how to organize it, and how to differentiate between different kinds of information and data using cell styles. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer them. See you next time. Thank you.